Hello people, and welcome back to part 36 of the Noobs Guide to Skylines. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Thanks so much for all the support last week when we built our vanilla windmill stack interchange, and yeah, you guys really enjoyed this. I think considered to be the best OE interchange build on the channel so far, isn't it? Really nice traffic flow to this thing. I'm in city buses using our bus lanes here as well. Very exciting, super fan of this. Indeed, thank you for all the support. However, what we would like to do today is indeed some more network and preparation expansion. So I'd like to turn my attentions over to this side of the map for the first time. What I'm envisioning here today is a little service interchange, probably a trumpet is going to be the most appropriate. And then I'd like a series of almost national roads that flow through this landmass and eventually link up with a series of several other smaller rural towns on this side. There will also be a cargo port here as well, which will provide a lot of jobs and industry for this side of the city. And almost kind of a polar opposite to the other side of New York. You know, this is very touristic, commercially sort of focused, it's palmy, it's all nice and pristine. And we can work with some different vibes over this side of New York now, so definitely going to get a cargo container in here at some point. And I'd also like to set up a ferry network as well today in the bay and into other areas of the city. So, let's see what we can do with some rural network expansion in City Skylines. So the first thing I'd like to do in this episode is to develop a little service interchange. So we're going to do a little trumpet design, and then this is very much going to feed into that rural part of the map that we talked about, you know, sort of a collection of rural communities that are slowly being enveloped by the development of New York. And we will certainly build out some more frames here to complete that sprawl, but now we want to be doing some more rural vibes, which should be quite interesting. Leads to a very different style of building, I think, when you start thinking rurally with cities. So let's have a look at the terrain and look sort of to see what's best to build the trumpet interchange with here today. So it's already on a little slope, so why don't we go ahead and start terraforming up a little layer here. Just increase the brush size. There we go. That looks like it's going to be enough height to clear it. We should be okay. Might want to maybe trick off a few more contour lines. So we will break the highway, only in a very small section, probably about there is appropriate. And then we're going to grab a highway road. I guess we could actually use the 4-lane compact for this highway, but we might actually do that coming out of it. We're just going to use the regular 2-way highway here. Okay, and then we're going to have it sort of angle off at this one. Yeah, this angle here, I don't want it to be straight with the highway through there because it's going to go off this way down toward the coastline. So let's bring this 30 units through the middle. Yeah, that should be okay. Should be able to get some quite nice designs in with this as well, actually. Should lead to quite an interesting little interchange formation. So let's now right click the slope at the top of the highway there. There we go. We'll also have this one come out as well. Wonderful. Then just get a nice slope up for this ramp to come up to. Probably about there should be ideal. Go ahead and grab that ramp again, and then we can just bring this round on a freeform now. Can be helpful to hit the occasional road guideline if you find you need it. Something about there is going to be acceptable. And then very similar to what we did with our first opening interchange, we just want to create some nice little sort of curved ramps here. So 120 would probably be acceptable, I think, actually. We can probably do this again here as well without the angle snap. There we go, that should be alright. And then this will serve as a slip system. And then this one can also come back in to there as well. That should do as a job. Tremendous. And again, so we're not using this interchange as an excuse to extend the highway. You know, there's not going to be sort of massive, you know, 6-lane highways flowing through this part of the map. It's very much going to be sort of country roads, sort of national road vibes. Okay, cool. So let's bring our elevation step up. A road guideline would probably be handy here as well. There we go, and then we can come back down into there. That should hopefully be a pretty similar situation on the other side too. And just to help the road guideline snap in, we're going to extend that one out to the same point the bridge starts. And that brings us back down to earth. And then we can just amend our directions of flow. Cool, so that's going to keep the main highway flowing. We haven't broken that connection, that's wonderful news. And we're going to get a nice little curve in there. And then we can also bring this one down. And that can go. So speaking of where this is going to go, I know that I do eventually want some kind of coastal country highway, if you like, to hug the waterline on this side of Noobia, at least for a little bit. It will eventually go back inland, of course, because we need the waterfront for a few more builds, like a cargo container, port, etc., and the fishing wharf, little rural side towns, lots of ferry action to be had this side of the map. So with that in mind, I'm going to set the slope up here, and then from this point, we're going to come on with a large brush size. We're going to slope all the way up to the start of the service interchange that we've just built. Of course, we can buy and sell soil as we need it. Okay, there we go. That should be pretty much what I'm after. So let's go ahead and just extend this road down, and then we'll do the other slip ramps in a second. So I might actually want my topography tool on for drawing this road out. That we can almost just let it meander down these slopes, get a few curves in there as well. It's very fun building rolling cities, and it can be hard to achieve with 9 tiles especially, but if you are joining us into a 25 tile build in our tutorial series, then hopefully you'll be enjoying the more rural vibes that are to come over the next sort of half of the series, if you like. So it's basically at the minute, but we've got a nice little winding road. It's going to be very cool from the bird's eye view as well. Let's go ahead and grab some slip ramps now, and some slope tool first of all, actually. So medium brush size, let's go ahead and hook the slope in here, and we'll just bring it up so it sort of evens it out a little bit. And the same thing here as well. We want to click that slope and then just let it come up in this general direction. Just smooth it all out so it's not horrifically steep. Alright. So again, similar to how we've sort of aligned networks before, this can always be useful again here to sort of bring in sort of a stretch of your highway slip ramps parallel with the main network. Give them all a equidistant connection, if you like. So why don't we go for that 210 connection on that node? It's going to be fairly sensible for me. Then we can just use those spaces that we've sloped out now in order to create some nice happy slip ramps. We'll go for a 300 connection there. Wonderful. And then we'll do the same thing here. Let's just eye up, hit any road guidelines that you think might be helpful for you. That one's going to be helpful for me, isn't it? And then it was a 300 connection, wasn't it? So we can quite easily replicate that on that side. So, of course, change the direction to flow so everyone's happy. And once you have got it all in, of course, all that terraforming work just wants to be re-amended. A little bit of level terrain and some major flattening space can be welcome here. Okay, just sort of blend it back into the environment a little bit more. And once you have done a little bit of leveling, then a touch of soften is also welcome as it comes back in here. And I think a little bit of Noobia Oaks forest will be appropriate here. Of course, we'll detail the interchange come the time lapse with some fencing, and perhaps a water tower might look really nice out here too. Right, let's get some very thick forest here. Otherwise, it's going to give us a really simple service interchange. Some bridge action going on it as well. It's not bad, okay? It's very low capacity, but it'll do a job for us. So now we can start coming down here. Cool, so let's come back to that terrain work now, and then see what we can do with some terraforming for this national road to occupy. So with this... Oh! That's what I wanted to do. Let's start that clip again. So with this terraforming work, I do want to obviously attack the topography, but I want to respect its shape. Okay, so we're just going to scoop out big layers here. You might think, oh my god, that cliff is insane. I know it is, but don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. So I might bring it up another little layer here. Okay, so we sort of ascend up, and then just want to dig out this cavity where the little national country seaside road is going to flow. And we're going to draw out some sort of temporary towns today as well with the districts and get them named after some of our Patreon subscribers. Really quite excited for this little rural development that's going to happen in Noobia Oak. Okay, yeah, let's keep sowing soil, that's fine. And then where this sort of very harsh embankment ends is where I want the ring road to kind of merge back up onto the lowest landmass above it, which looks like it's going to be there. So let's have that. We'll make sure this is all the same level. And then we'll grab this, and then this can now slope up to that point. And then we can sort of open the land back up for development over there. Of course, it looks like this might be a good spot for our cargo port eventually. So I'm thinking we'll have some of the unique factories over here, things like the car factory that haven't been used yet. We've also got some more, yeah, we've got the shipyard to do. Yeah, we'll do some shipyard stuff. So lots of sort of like rural industry that has lots of little towns scattered around it that sort of keep it fed with workers and whatnot. Okay, cool. So let's speed up this road and then we'll get it painted out. So we've got this road painted out, also done some terraforming work as well, just so the cliffs aren't quite as obvious. A little bit of slope and soften work here goes a long way, just to blending in what is very obvious harsh terrain work into a little bit more of a natural scape. But of course it will all change as individual builds come along these cliff sides and sort of hillsides over here. But right now it gives us a base frame for what we want to sort of talk about in today's episode, which is going to be setting up a ferry network. So we haven't really talked about ferries before because we haven't really worked with water that much. So let's have a little look what we can do. So first of all, we want to place a ferry depot. Now this ideally wants to be sort of on its part of a build, but it's a difficult asset to use, this one. So we'll factor it into a build at some point, but for today's episode I just want that ferry connection. So I'm going to bring in a little road. Have it connecting there. That's going to give our ferries, you know, actual ferries, which is good. So we've got two stops under ferries. We have the ferry pier, and then we have the ferry stop. One will accept two ferries, the other will accept one. Then there's also a transport hub as well, which is the ferry and bus exchange. I believe this is mass transit. I think it is. I'm not entirely sure. Could be. Who knows? It's lost knowledge. But we can also use this one as well, which I think I am actually going to use first of all. So we're going to have the ferry and bus exchange here, which is a really cute looking asset. We don't really get to see this that much, but wonderful asset, this one. Really nice little transport hub. We can get some buses pouring into these little bays here, and I certainly will get some buses running back and too. But of course, once this side of the map is established, it will come over here. Tremendous. So now let's talk about some traffic flow mechanics off of this road, because of course all the traffic down here, especially if there's going to be a container port down here as well, this road is going to have a lot of traffic on it. So at several points we can introduce a roundabout into this. That's going to be great. But there's also something else we can do thanks to the update that came with plazas and promenades, and this is the introduction of the 4-lane road at the compact version. So I kind of talk about what's going to happen here. So let's say we have this connection coming in here, and then that one coming in there as well. What we can do as we approach these junctions into a ferry stop, or this could also be a rural town, is to upgrade them into these compact little 4-lane numbers. You could also achieve something similar with the asymmetrical road. You know, it's going to give that dedicated turning lane into the port, whilst also maintaining a straight ahead connection into the rest of the sort of rural road network. But I think I'm just a fan of the compact 4-lane roads. We could even do the entire road as compact 4-lane if we wanted to, maybe in sections where it slows down and there's a little more traffic to factor in. I think we can definitely do that, can't we? How does this actually work with asymmetrical? It doesn't work too well, does it? That's okay then, it's fine. Yeah, so we'll have that there. And then that can meander for 4 lanes for a little bit further. To about there, and then it can go back to that high-speed highway. Now we've got those in, let's go ahead and create a little slope up to this one here. I'd like it to kind of meander and serve as a little bit of a switchback, I suppose. And then let's go ahead and grab a little bit of level terrain just so we can mark out where the first town will sit. And these towns will be built in separate episodes. I think what we will do is do a sort of a Noobs guide to modular rural town building. We can maybe do 3 or 4 little separate towns in the same episode. Do let me know if there's anything specific you guys want covering in that particular video. Tremendous. So again, I think a little bit of asymmetry here initially is going to be quite welcome. Let's come off all of our snap-ins because we're going to want to freeform this for a little bit. So we'll have that up to there. We want to reverse the asymmetry into the busier junction, and then we'll switch back to our regular 2-lane road with an angle snap and a freeform tool. I just want this to meander up this little hillside now before it arrives at the rural town, and then we can use that point there as a little snap point, and then just a couple of little markers that are there for you at a later date to say, okay, this is where the boundary of the new town will start. We'll also give this a little bit of a painting, and then we're going to name this particular town Francis, after our wonderful patron subscriber, Richard Francis, of course. Thanks, always support Rich. Real secret blend of herbs and spices, mate. And then we're just going to have this little rural town that's going to be sat up on the hill now, overlooking the ferry depot, with ferries coming and going, and taking people all over the bay. It's going to be tremendously exciting. So I'll hook utilities up in a second, of course, but what I would like to do is at least get a ferry connection established. And I think the most obvious point for a ferry connection is over by the waterfront district that we did ages ago. This is such an old build now. This Noobs guys coming into a really old city. It's the same age as Ilos, actually, isn't it, now you think about it? Cool. So I'm just going to chisel away a little bit of terrain. Now, of course, we will extend the waterfront down this way, but for today's episode, I really just want this sort of functioning ferry coming in. There we go. So we'll have it come down there. Let's go ahead and grab a regular ferry stop from the ferry tab, and we'll throw this onto this one. It will snap onto that at pretty much a 90-degree angle, which would be amazing for me. And then we can keep this road network going as it meanders probably up and out of the waterfront district. It can take many different shapes and forms. Now as it moves away out of the city, tremendous. I guess you will also need water over here as well. At some point I am probably going to have to remove the water pipes with a mod, just because of the node count, but I will hold off as long as possible for that for our console friends. Cool, so we'll get some commercial here. That should eventually jump through. If not, it probably just wants a little bit of help with an earthquake sensor in the corner, and then it will hop through once that commercial grows in there, of course. So now let's go ahead and connect in our first ferry line. So I'd like some sort of realistic curvature to these. So why don't we see if we can create a nice little curve. Let's make sure we're still snapped at angle. Yes, we are. Let's have this come on a nice big bend right in this sort of mouth of the river where it really opens up into the coast. Have that there. We also need to connect the ferry depot into the line so ferries can reach it. And then you can sort of see how this is going to progress now. We're just going to have these ferries run the coastline. They come all the way and basically follow this national road and serve as a way for people to get back and to from each side of this very, very wide river that we're playing with. So we actually already have someone using the ferry depot, or the ferry port, because this person actually works at the ferry depot. And rather than driving from the other side, he's actually taking the ferry to work at the ferry depot, which is amazing, right? It's kind of like a baker eating his own bread, I suppose, isn't it? There he goes. There's some more people here too. Hello, people. Exchange students. Tourists. Clock towers. Okay. I wasn't expecting that. It would appear that people were leaving the highway as they come into Noveria to actually take the ferries into the main city. I'm very much on board with that. That's very nice. Yes, please, everyone. I wasn't expecting that. I really wasn't. But cool. Right, okay. So this is what a ferry looks like in City Skylines if you haven't used them before. They're a little bit underwhelming in terms of public transport. They only carry 50 people. If you've ever been on a real-life ferry, especially one that's this size, which appears to be sort of double-deckered, they certainly hold a lot more than 50 people. But there are mods that can fix that if you're interested. Right? Tremendous. So let's talk about what we can do to detail one of these little ferry stops, shall we? So why don't we do a little bit of commercial? And then because we're going with a rural vibe, a little bit of shattered nature reserve fencing is always welcome. So why don't we bring this on a little freeform tool? We'll have it go through there. That's going to be good for me. Then maybe another little curve of it right here. Okay. Not too bad. Go ahead and grab some content creator trees. Perhaps A couple of live oaks will be welcome near the main junction. Some overgrowth in there as well. Okay, just sort of really focus on your road junctions when you come in to do these sorts of rural bits of detailing. You'll really notice a difference. For those of you that followed Noveria will sort of know what I'm coming at with this sort of angle. Did something quite similar over there. Get some palm plants in here too. Some larger bushes. Tremendous. There's any zone squares here. I don't think I'm averse to a little bit of 2x2, although I don't really want people stopping on this bit of the road. So we'll maybe take it there instead. We're going to get in here. And again, I'm very choosy about what assets are going to grow up here. I don't think I mind a little marketplace down here. I think that's going to be alright. So we've got a little fry guys coming in too. Relatively happy with that. And if you have Find It and Ploppable Rico, or Rico Revisited rather, you can be very sort of customizable with what actually comes in here, but some general small commercial spacing is really what I'm after. Office would also work nicely here too if you wanted. Of course, just be careful with what assets come in. And then just a general sort of thick content creator tree line behind the commercial to back onto the rural country road is what I'm trying to achieve. We can see now where perhaps another little stretch of nature reserve fencing might also be welcome. Before we know it, just as we see those little commercial units now, pop through the tree line as we're driving past, we're just greeted with a much more sense of rural, aren't we? If that's the right phrase. Okay, oh, hello floating grass. Not sure what's happening there on the first skyline bank, but it should be okay. I'm really surprised that this is getting used already. Yeah, I really think it would. Okay, but now what we have is a little sort of rural stop for the town of Francis, and if we sort of bring off a little thick pine belt around the edge of the sort of main detailing, again it'll just accentuate that rural vibes, exactly what we spoke about when we were developing this side of the map. When you have sort of networks here that are paralleled and there's very thick tree lined, you do get a real sense of countryside. So, don't forget all these tips that you picked up throughout the Noobs Guide series now. It all still translates into future builds, and you can variate that design as well. And that's where a lot of the fun lies in City Skylines for me. Alright, some rocks would be welcome here as well. Feel free to get involved in some breakwater action, right? Things we've done before, perhaps a couple of decals against the shoreline just to remove a little bit of the brown. Terraform as well, we will terraform some ferry ports. Oh my goodness, no! This is why we have the historical assets, everyone, otherwise that happens. Right? Tremendous, cool. So that's one little ferry port design. I think I'm fairly happy with that. You just want to make sure that this one's going to be okay. Might actually grow back as a nicer asset. It's going to be a big bite, is it? Yes, it is. Okay. Cool. Wonderful. So this is the ferry port for Francis developed. Let's go ahead and do another one now. Now let's have a look at the second ferry port. Again, I can see now where the terrain is becoming a little bit too high for ferries to be nice for me, at least. So I think what we are going to do is just grab another contour line here and chisel it away against the layer that the high-speed national road is sat on. So let's do that. Okay. Push out a little bit of landmass as well, don't worry about any flooding. We've got plenty of water displacement possibilities on this map because there's so much space for the water to go. So we don't have to worry too much about terraforming out these larger peninsulas. It's not too bad. Do we want to go a few more contour lines down? I think it's a possibility. Go ahead and do that. There we go. And then we will grab a little bit of slope. Let's grab that height and then we'll just slope this corner up. And then this can be how people enter this particular ferry. So let's come ahead and grab in another one now. Why don't we go for the larger one? So this has room for 2 ferries at once. So that could be actually quite interesting to perhaps do a direct crossing. So we'll have the main ferry loop that loops around all the stations. But maybe every time we use the ferry pier that has 2 stops on it, we can use one of those lines that just crosses directly straight back over to the other side of the island, rather than them having to take the full loop. That might make it a little bit more efficient. So we'll see. So let's delete this placeholder ferry line that we placed in. Now we know where the new one's coming in. I think we'll go for there. Is that going to be alright? Yes. Yes, I'm happy with that, I think. Let's go ahead and give it a road connection. Let's use some of the new roads. Why don't we go for the one with the grass median? And of course we want an angle snap-on for most of the time when we're doing this. Let's just meander it up this little slope and it can get a happy little connection in here. Again, there's some simple traffic flow we can do. We can do some asymmetry here perhaps this time rather than using the compact 4-lane road. It's going to keep the dedicated turning lane in for people wanting to go into the ferry port. And then eventually, of course, the turning lane for people wanting to come up to the next town, which is going to start from this space here. So we use this compact 4-lane road for this. Desperately trying to find a way to use these new roads. Very excited for them. And I can definitely envision sort of the town facing out onto the seaside here. So why don't we cut away a little bit of that terrain layer. Let's go ahead and slope it up a little bit so it's not quite as harsh. There we go. A little bit of softening all around that just so it sort of blends in a little bit easier. Cool. I'm going to use this road here, come back onto a straight road snap, and I'm going to grab a couple of dirt roads, and then we'll just say, okay, this one here is the start of a new rural town that we're going to be planning out, and then this one here is going to be called Coxton, after our wonderful patron subscriber, Jennifer Cox. Thank you so much for all your support, Jen, really do appreciate it, and hope you enjoy your rural town once we get out here to develop it. So of course it's going to want services and whatnot, but why don't we see if we can give this one a little bit more of a slightly different frontage to what lies over by the other one. You know, variation is the spice of life after all. So we'll come into this side. That's going to give us a 5 deep tile spacing. We know that we can probably squeeze a dog park in there. And I think a police station might also be welcome. Of course, this can be the police station for the town of Coxton. And then perhaps a little bit more commercial in there. Let's also grab a pathway and we can maybe link this through with the grid. Come through this side, connect in there. A bit of detailing, looks like there's room for a tasteful little tree line to appear there behind that commercial once it comes in. Okay, I'm not too worried about this harsh terrain here. Where we do have that harsher terrain generate against the national road again, that's going to be a really nice spot for perhaps a different type of fencing. Why don't we try some farm, for which no snapping is always helpful for this, especially when we're on relatively tight terrain spaces. Let's just have that run through there. Then we can probably bring in maybe even a little sort of live oak pattern here if we want to do indeed hide a little bit of that nasty sort of cliff edge in. We can have that. Let's go ahead and historical this. We'll get the utilities hooked up to it and the ferries and then see what we think of this one. So speaking of setting up this kind of converging ferry system where there's a loop and a direct line, I think this spot over here by the fishing harbour and the zoo, where there is indeed access into wider public transport networks across the city, would be an ideal place to do this. So I'm going to remove the waste transfer facility. No, we're not, because it needs to be emptied with natural disasters first, so we will collapse the building using natural disasters. There it goes, and now we can delete it. You can also do that same thing with cemeteries. Oh my god, did not mean to delete the key. Oh, please go back in without any trouble. Thank god. Right, did not mean to delete the key. Cool, so let's go ahead and grab that ferry port again, the ferry harbour. There we go. Oh, it actually connects in right there. That's actually tremendously helpful, thank you so much. So, then what we will do is allow this ferry line to continue around here. That's it, have to avoid the wildlife enclosure. Otherwise our ferries will be taking out the whales. Let's meander it around. They can come right by this waterfront, which indeed will detail this waterfront a little bit with, you know, ferries coming back and to in front of it now. And then this one will, of course, carry on out this side and meet up with further loops in the ferry network to join up with this one. But then what I would like to happen is for a line to come directly across the bay. And that's going to hook in directly into this one, but we'll do this one out first. And get a little curve in. So this is really going to bring quite a lot of Noobs waterways to life a little bit, I think, isn't it? So hopefully you can see my thought process here. I think I'm explaining this alright. We just want to have that direct connection, and that can meet back up with the loop line. Cool. So we will drag this stop. Oh no, let's go ahead and drag the stop to there. That's cool. And then this ferry line here is going to be the direct connection back across to this side. Okay. So, to my understanding, that should all work and be okay. Of course, we're just going to want the ferries to come back out. Yes, there's the new ferry lines. Yeah, ferry line 2, we could probably rename them. Let's go ahead and make that a white line. I'll rename them in a little bit here. But it should give us what we want. We've now got another little ferry terminal over here as well. You should head straight out now, yes, and then directly across the bay. And then that should just service that line there now. There should be no reason. Oh, it's actually over there, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, and then they can meet up with the loop ferries. So this should be quite an intricate little way of using a ferry network, I think. I haven't really tried it in this configuration before, but I'm hoping it's going to be a success. Cool, wonderful. So I think I'd like one more ferry port along here before because this is all going to be very heavy cargo port, like a big container port, so I don't really want sort of small ferries moving around near those enormous container ships. So it looks like this spot here, just where we come onto this little beachfront, might actually be a nice idea. And why don't we try and respect that little beach design? I just want to expose a little bit of that sand. I'm just going to use level terrain to do that. Okay, there we go. Just little bits out into the water. And then from that point there, we'll just slope all that out. It should be nice and easy to slope. There we go. That's what we want. Tremendous. Cool. So we'll do this one a little bit wider. Wonderful. Alright. So let's go ahead and grab a road. Again, we'll use a fancy new one. Why don't we go for the tree road with median this time? Seems like a nice idea to me. Then we'll bring this down on a little stretch. Just want a road length here as well, as you can grab a curve road tool. Do 420. Down. Let's bring it down a touch further than that. I think we'll actually just snap it on an angle rather than do a curve. Of course, the trees will grow back once we the water sort of finds its feet again. And then we'll grab some more ferries. We'll just go for a regular ferry stop this time. Okay, they don't always need to be these, you know, enormous hubs. And then actually a little bit of symmetry here, so we can do 600. You know, we did that on that side, and then bring it back up into that. Then we've got sort of a space for a larger part design here now, so why don't we grab one of the terrain conforming ones? Looks like, oh, it's not going to fit, is it? So annoying. Almost. Almost. Okay, we'll do that one instead then, right? And then let's do a very heavy commercial line here. Some 4 deeps as well, I'm not averse to. Perhaps some office zoning as well, if we're feeling a little bit daring. And then we can use these pathways here as an extent, or an excuse to extend some designs. There's also, I can see, a perfect opportunity here for a little walkable layer of height, for which we will use as an excuse to establish the new town. So I know that this cliff face here is way too high for me. I want to do a little bit of terrain work here just to level it all off and push it back. Again, harsher is always good when we're starting with terraforming in cities. Grab one height, level it all out to that one, so we have none of those bumpy contour lines. Tremendous. We'll also prepare a way for the road to come into the town, which we will use this as an excuse, and then slope that up there. And I think we'll stick with this sort of windy, cute little road. We do need to do our asymmetrical lane maths here as well if we want to maintain that theme. There we go, yeah, so let's have asymmetry here. Yeah, and it can flow through. And probably downgrade that one as well, actually, into the one with the median. Again, to kind of keep your road networks varied, you know, as long as they're sort of sticking generally to the road hierarchy. You can be pretty creative with the sort of combinations and alignments with all these new roads that the vanilla game has now. Okay. Cool, so a simple ferry stop. This probably would be a nice little spot for some keys as well, if you wanted to. Perhaps a little bit of simple fenceless. Let's come in with a bit of a line Actually probably should draw this before the actual ferry stop goes in, would be ideal. It's also come onto a road guideline too. I'd like to align with the road if at all possible. And then we can chuck that ferry stop back in there, okay? Don't always have to have sand, or, you know, throw a key in occasionally. There's all different designs that you've picked up hopefully throughout this series now. Or indeed, you know, beach it up like Noobs waterfront. Yeah, do all this sort of stuff with it. It's up to you. Depends how raw you want the theme to be. Of course, if you are following along or try and take inspiration, it doesn't have to be raw. You can go, you know, high density here if you want to. And then with this road here, we're going to bring it up and around. We're going to snake it up into the town. And again, a little straight section with a couple of dirt road boundaries. Should be welcome, I think. And then we can name this next town. And then this town is going to be called Robinson, which is going to be named after John Robinson. And again, another one of our truly wonderful Patreon subscribers. Let's go ahead and finish up some detailing here. Let's extend all these path networks out into the various corners of the world. We haven't got a fire station down here yet, so let's go ahead and throw down a little firehouse. Let's go for probably the vanilla base game one's going to be the most appropriate, I think, isn't it? We'll have this here. That should be okay, I think. Again, there's plenty of little rural detailing palettes now. Why don't we sort of, since we're coming down toward sort of the beachfront again, why don't we move back into our more tropical forest brush as opposed to the pines, which tend to occupy sort of the higher mountain spaces. Okay, so we can have some very thick tropical forest within these spaces. Again, rock detailing to be had during our detailing time lapse, of course. And of course, any flooding will subside. Cool, so I'll go ahead and get utilities and ferries hooked in, and then we can see how many people start moving around this network now. So just look how much more lively Noobs waters look now. Got big, granted there's too many cruise liners because the game still hasn't fixed this after 7 years. Maybe one day this will be fixed. But either way, I've also thrown in a ferry depot to complete the loop on the ring road, just a very simple stop. And then it loops back now, where indeed we have a counterclockwise and a clockwise ferry loop around the entire bay. These are the blue and the black lines, so they just pass by each other. And then we've also got the cross bay line as well, which is what these little white boats are serving as also. Of course, they're relatively quiet at the minute because there's not vast amounts of reason for them to head over there, but hopefully as things develop, indeed they will actually head out that way. So we're very excited to see this all develop. And we can use this as a bus hub as well for the rural communities. You know, this line does come with sort of bus travel. So I'm very happy with that. That's really cool. There are people using it here too. Well, their little feet are clipping through the pit though. Never noticed that before. But okay, whatever. That's fine. So I'm really happy with the infrastructure that we've set up over here. You know, we've got some plans for rural towns to develop. 3 of them over here, and of course the main container port to actually come in as well. So there's one more thing I'd like to have a look at before we do a detailing time lapse, and I think something that's going to complement the rural theme very well is the introduction of rail. So we do have an external cargo line over here. Well, it's external cargo and passenger. So I'm thinking that we will actually draw out an extension of this rail line as it heads over towards the rural part of the town. So again, like we discussed last episode, nice big happy sweeping curves are always more than welcome. And then it's up to you whether or not you want to bridge it or sort of tunnel it under. Again, I think I'm just going to stick with the old favourite embanked rail line. It always works nicely for me, especially in rural themes as well. So we'll just grab these 2 heights, create a mound for the rail line to cross over. Let's go for small elevation steps, line up with the guideline of the highway. Hopefully we can just pop straight across there. That's wonderful news. Can bring that back down to earth at a 480 measurement. There we go. Go ahead and grab the slope tool, right click that, and then just push that all up. And tremendous. That should just give us a relatively happy connection in there. Same thing again over here. Let's slope it up. So we can bring cargo into this for, of course, the eventual cargo line. Now I can see here we're going to want to cross again in a minute, aren't we? So in all honesty, there's probably no point in bringing it back down. We might as well keep it embanked through this little palm forest. Again, a little bit more terraforming than we need at first, but it'll do a job. Yeah, so as I was saying before I got distracted by elevations, we can use this line to feed cargo into the container port, but we can also use it to bring tourists into the more rural parts of town. So again, we'll find the road guideline snap here. Let's go up by single elevation. Let's cross over the highway. We'll go for 480 down. Either side again as well. Get that in. Same slope over here too. It's really fun once you sort of start playing with this space in vanilla. It is a real shame that the console people don't get access to 25 tiles. I think sometimes 81 tiles can be a little bit daunting. You're like, oh, I've got so much space to fill. But 25 is a nice happy little medium for a fairly sensible size sort of small country or state, if you like. So yeah, it's going to be good. So yeah, we can definitely bring a passenger line into Francis here. I'm not averse to that. We're going to go ahead and throw that there. And then we know to separate out our cargo lines. So perhaps the cargo rail line here can be adjacent, and then it can come back in. Then that can carry on down towards the cargo port, or indeed more passenger lines in and around the rural towns as it flows over the mountains and far away. So that's going to be good to have that rail infrastructure there. Of course, once we've done the terraforming, we want to do a little bit of softening. So let's have a little look at the ferry lines and just see how they're performing with basically no reason for them to come over here. So let's go for ferries. We'll also name them as well. So the counterclockwise loop is getting the most passengers at the minute, and the Cross Bay ferry is only getting 4, which is understandable. You know, they don't really have much. I'm really surprised as to how many tourists are actually coming off the highway to actually take the ferries. It's really interesting. However, guys, I think that feels like a good place for a detailing time-lapse. What we are going to do is come through this country road network, redo some lane maths wherever we need it, and then lots of this little sort of tight rural commercial detailing in and around the ferry stops that are tied into each of the 3 new towns. And just generally sort of spruce them a bit, make them look a little bit nicer, and also let the ferries continue to stagger out across their lines as to where they need to go. A little bit more terraforming work where needed. Lots more forest down to come in. I'm also thinking we might tie in each of the rural towns into a industry theme. Francis has a lot of fertile land around it. We can probably tie in some of this ore stuff into Coxton. And then maybe Robinson can have a little bit of forestry here. Might be quite fun. Not like full industrial areas, you know, like we're not going to build, you know, another major oil refinery because we already have one, but it can maybe have, you know, some smaller oil fields, or perhaps, you know, some small little ore mines, like, you know, some of this stuff up here. So it's not another major ore pit, just a smaller little selection of industry. Might be quite nice. I guess we'll see and find out together, of course, won't we? And then detail up spaces like this that I've now changed, so it blends in with builds that were here many moons ago. Otherwise, let's detail up the Noob Yoke ferry and rural network, and then we'll be right back. guys, let's have a detailing review, shall we? So we've continued to introduce that very thick pine forest all over this side of the map. And you really get an impression of this when you're sort of at a distance and sort of low to the water line. Really helps with the rural theme, doesn't it? So please do consider some very thick forest if you're moving out rural. You will notice a big difference with it, alright? So we've introduced some rock formations along the shoreline alongside some further rock detailing. And we also have a little mini bus line, one of the first bus lines flowing through here, which actually stops at each of the major towns. And of course, those bus lines will develop as the actual town itself grows, where we've also thrown in one of the old school content creator stations, which very much lends itself to this theme. So really looking forward, probably next episode, to getting stuck into sort of 3 different and slightly themed rural town designs. I think it should be quite a nice episode for us, so I hope you're looking forward to that. Again, some more rural fence detail on these switchbacks as we come back down towards the ferry boats. And what a wonderful view over to Noveria from these little rural parts, right? Looking over to the skyline there, see the clock tower in the suburb, all the nightlife, some of our high density developments. Really happy with how Noveria looks. Over in the converging line ferry depot, so this is indeed where our ferry lines meet. So we see we have the blue, which is clockwise, the green, which is, the black, which is counterclockwise, and then the white is the direct cross bay route. So hopefully, once everything else is in around this side, we will see that process come to fruition. I hope it's going to work quite nicely. It seems to be doing so far. And then again, around this station, we have some more tree patterns with some pathway and some general sort of rural overgrown vibes, including these little rocks and overgrowth patterns from the content creator pack, as they all flank around a pathway as they meet back up with a minibus stop on the main road. One actually does come down into the harbour. There you go, you can see it coming now. It just stops outside here and then stops on the main road on its way back through the towns. And then we have another content creator station up at Coxton, and again this will develop as a rural town eventually, and I think I might even end up feeding the rail through the mountain here. Okay, sort of similar to what we did way over here, right? Okay, just sort of passing a network as a tunnel through a mountain. I haven't done it now just because of course things will be subject to change, but it's an idea I can certainly see coming into fruition as we maybe have another train station further down. And then we've just left our networks over here, which will eventually turn into Noveria's main cargo port sort of container yard, if you like. Lots of unique factories over here, and indeed the ability to import and export cargo, which I'm very interested to see how the AI actually prefers to do that, because we have road and rail here, so it'll be an interesting experiment at the same time. And of course we will eventually get around to that build as well. And then further over towards the rail line now, we've just softened everything out and sort of harshened the embanking as the rail line flows through the countryside. And of course there will be probably some form of build out here, maybe a service area, perhaps a big cargo distribution yard where we have the rail line. Again, thank you for all the comments on the community post as well as for ideas in Noveria. Really do appreciate it. And then just some general gentle interchange detailing, including a water tower with some overgrowth and fencing around it, and a couple of wind turbines, not only to actually give power to the tower, but just as highway decoration as well. Really do enjoy these things when they're placed appropriately against our main infrastructure like this. So really cute little simple service interchange design. And yeah, already people taking it to get in and out of here. See how he's going to use it. Just get on that slip ramp and away he goes. Wonderful news. So really happy to see Noveria's infrastructure developing as we continue to move through the series, and what a wonderful little view that is, right? Coming off the interchange and just seeing Noveria's downtown through the forest. Yes, please. So good. Love building rural everyone. This series is about to get a whole lot more interesting for me. I do love a rural build. Otherwise, guys, that is going to do it for today. I would like to thank you all so much for watching. If you've enjoyed, likes, comments and shares below really do help me out. Equally as much if you haven't enjoyed it, then please feel free to leave me a dislike as well. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into all these little rural towns that now have their own ferry depots hooked into the wider ferry network, which we've set up across Noveria's Bay today. So we'll see how it works as we continue to grow out this side of the map, so please do hang around for those cinematics, but I will shut up and I will leave it there. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.